Hello, it's 3 minutes after 10 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Good morning, I hope you're well. If you had to make a list, I don't want to alienate anybody at the top of the show, but I'm talking to you now if you are, if you might describe yourself as quite a regular listener to the programme. If you had to make a list of my favourite subjects, what would be on it? You can't really say Brexit, because that's sort of not really a subject, is it? It's a state of mind. Almost. But I love these sorts of stories, and I'm conscious that you may not, or you may not find them as interesting as I do. But I think on this, I'll go as far as to say, if you don't, you're wrong. I think it's so important. I think that, for example, the failure of people in this country to look up when they're cross instead of looking down is responsible for almost all of the bad things that happen to us. I really do. Even the refugee crisis is a consequence of people being encouraged to look down when they're searching around for someone on whom to take out their unhappiness or their sense of injustice. You get them to look up, and, you know, that's how you end up with revolutions and monarchies crumbling. It's not necessarily going to deliver a better society for the ordinary Jean-Pierre in the street, but it's worth thinking about, isn't it? And how regular a listener do you have to be to know what line of what hymn I quote traditionally at this point? When I talk about the subscription to the natural order by people who are at the wrong end of it. I do think as I get older that these bigger issues become enduringly fascinating. The stuff that the ancients were writing about 2,500 years ago. Cicero had something to say about this business. But you look at the... Thank you, Saeed. My favourite subjects are not ULEZ and parking tickets, pal. Although I do quite like a little bit of sarcasm. I find myself, as I get older, enduringly fascinating by the things that stop societies from being better. I just said fascinating instead of fascinated. I can't really find myself enduringly fascinating, although I appreciate that sometimes perhaps I give that impression, particularly during these blooming monologues. But I don't, you know, the things that stop societies or populations from being better. And deference has always been at the top of my list for that kind of thing. Deference, forelock tugging, cap doffing, telling people or encouraging, persuading successfully people to vote against their own interests. And of course, when they vote against their own interests, they vote in somebody else's interests. They cast votes that end up sustaining a status quo, under which they are losers. I don't know. It just gets more and more interesting to me. I'm glad it does, because the alternative as you enter your second half century, of course, is to switch off these sort of thoughts and think, well, flipping heck, if they haven't worked it out now after 2,500 years, I don't know why we're bothering on LBC on a Tuesday morning. But sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. It's nice to feel your brain working, isn't it? We should get that on a T-shirt. It's nice to feel your brain working. Sometimes, and you know, the issues that have exercised brains for hundreds of years are quite possibly the issues that get your brain working best. Quite a few of you, I'm delighted to say, know exactly what I refer to. The rich man in his castle, the poor man in his gate, the poor man at his gate. God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. So presumably that's 19th century, that hymn. Victorian era, and children up and down the land singing All Creatures Great and Small, actually warbling at morning assembly, singing in church, children and adult alike, in support of a status quo that has someone sleeping in a gutter outside a palace, because that's the way God wanted it. Incredible, right? But here we are, persuaded that Jacob Rees-Mogg has an IQ in double figures. That's apparently the consequence, the modern day equivalent of a rich man in his castle, a poor man at his gate. Why am I wibbling on about this? Well, I always find class-based conversations interesting, and I find Keir Starmer, as we discussed yesterday, increasingly interesting as well, and sometimes frustrating. I think the consensus yesterday on the clean air stuff was that he was being correctly cautious. Although I hope I don't need to remind anybody, that doesn't mean it's a 100% opinion of a 100% certainty. It just meant that on the balance of contributions, the sense was that the stepping back or removing himself from the firing line on air quality conversations was probably pragmatic. I think he's gone a little further overnight and distanced himself still more from the Mayor of London. We shall see whether or not the latest phase of ULEZ goes in the same direction as the last phase of ULEZ, i.e. all the snowflakes get their knickers in a right old twist about it, then it happens and everybody stops talking about it because it's absolutely fine, and lo and behold, we have slightly cleaner air or considerably cleaner air than we had before. We shall see. 9 after 10. Sir Keir Starmer appeared to distance himself from Tony Blair last night as he pledged to vigorously promote the interests of the working class above other sections of society. He was speaking in Scotland, where the left has done rather better than in other parts of the United Kingdom, partly because of the media. Although it is horribly skewed against independence, it still leans a little more to the left than their sister titles south of the border do. You remember that in 1999, I think it was, Tony Blair declared that the class war is over. Starmer putting some clear blue water there, talking about how his Labour Party would smash the class ceiling. And the class ceiling would be the thing that stops people getting higher up the ladder of life due to the circumstances of their birth. Now, part of the reason why I find this so fascinating is because I don't know whether it works anymore. I've watched the Labour Party, the Labour movement, in the course of my politically conscious life, which sadly isn't all of it. I was quite political as a youth. And then obviously since I've been doing this job, I've been quite political. But for my 20s or for my I was too busy raving. Is the truth of it. I was really only interested in, I just wanted to dance, Dad. That was it. I didn't really get started. And when I got going in newspapers, quite unexpectedly, I went down a very shallow route and ended up writing about show business. Although, as I often said at the time, who would you rather be writing about, Norman Cook or Norman Lamont? Which shows my age, if nothing else. But certainly, since I've been doing this job, I think that the perception of Labour has changed. I think it's become a more middle-class movement. And I think part of the problem with that is that it attracts people who, this is why organs like The Spectator have to invent phrases like virtue signalling. It attracts people who want to improve the lives of others. It attracts people who think that the system is unfair, even though they've done all right out of it. And this isn't exclusive. Obviously, it's still, the party of choice for most working people who haven't had their brains boiled by Faragist bigotry. But the perception in public of the Labour Party, the parliamentary Labour Party, has been much more Tony Blair than Jess Phillips in recent years, which I think is electorally actually possibly a problem, because people don't want to be portrayed as needing help, do they? Or most people don't want to be portrayed as needing help. Not if you're comparing yourself to somebody over the road who looks like you, right? I say, my politics are all about helping people like you, John. And John goes, well, don't patronise me. I don't need you to stop virtue signalling. Well, that's ridiculous. Of course, if I was cut from slightly different cloth and I said, people like you are being left behind because they're giving everything to foreigners and immigrants, then I can pocket your vote. But obviously, comparing yourself, seeing yourself as someone in need of help and in need of support, unless you can provide a side order of prejudice, a side order of xenophobia or worse, racism, it doesn't really work. I don't think it really works. I don't know. Perhaps I'm wrong. But you look at the last Labour leaders movement, which was very much promising to improve the lot of other people, of sometimes unspecified people in need of support and help. And a lot of the people who supported that, nice people, a bit naive, but decent people, they were all in favour of it. But it wasn't their own lives that they were seeking to improve. It was often unspecified other lives. And that's why. That's why I find this so interesting, because I'm not quite sure what he means. The class ceiling must be smashed. I mean, it's a nice oratorical device. It's a bit of a refreshing change for Keir, who sometimes perhaps gives the impression of not knowing where the ignition switch is when he's doing a speech in public. We're going to smash the class ceiling, brothers and sisters, comrades. But what is it? What is it? And have you ever bumped your head against it? Because if you're going to smash it, you have to know where it is, and you have to know what it is. And I'm not sure I do. I know what a golden ticket is. I know why the school I went to and the connections I made gave me a swagger, as I think it was called by a Tory politician not long ago. It gave me a swagger that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't, for example, been adopted. My life would have been very different. The privilege that my parents bestowed upon me would not be there, and therefore I would be different. But that's not the same as a glass ceiling. A golden ticket is not the same as a glass ceiling. How do you smash a glass ceiling? How do you do it? So, I mean, goodness. 0345 60973 is the number you need. I mean, I don't know. Have we grown up a bit now, or are we still interested in answering the question of what does working class even mean? Because I don't know, really. I think it used to mean someone who had to work for a living, but these days that's almost everybody. What does working class even mean? You can have a go at that if you want. But what's the class ceiling? What is the class ceiling? Because if you get this right, I think it's incredibly powerful politics. If you get it right, if you portray people successfully as being held back by circumstance, then you get them on side when you promise to clash the ceiling, to smash the ceiling. I mean, right-wing rhetoric will be on the other side of the fence all the time saying, well, no, the only reason you haven't got more is because you don't work hard enough or you get on your bike. Nobody likes being told that, but we love being told that about other people. Well, rather, Tory voters do. We love being told other people need to work harder. Other people need to get on their bike. Other people need to get a better job. Other people need to discover the value range in the local supermarket. Other people need to cook themselves a meal for 30p a day or whatever it is. You love hearing that. Your classic Tory voter loves hearing that other people are lazy and feckless and held back only by their lifestyle choices. No one else wants to hear it. You persuade people that they're being held back by something else. In this case, a class ceiling. It could be good politics. Because if you've got a class ceiling above you, you're going to punch up, right? You're not going to punch down. And it doesn't necessarily... Well, anyway. That's what I want to know today. What do you think it means? So, is it there? First of all, is it there? Don't tell me what it looks like. It looks like a sheet of glass. How do you know it's there? Have you ever bumped your head against it? I haven't. Not really. I told you stories about having the wrong bank card. Everybody else had a Coots card and mine was from the Halifax. If only I'd known that could get you columns in the Daily Telegraph and interviews on the BBC if you've got a history of telling the country lies about Brexit. But I didn't have a Coots card when I was a gossip columnist in my early days, and lots of other young lads did, thanks to their parents' wealth. But that's not really a class ceiling. I mean, career-wise, it didn't have any impact at all upon how we did. Those young men sitting around that table in 1998, throwing their cards into the dish in the middle. None of them have done measurably better than me as a consequence. Some of them have, but not as a consequence of class. I don't think I've bumped up against mispronouncing some words because I grew up in Kidderminster, not Belgravia. You just get it right next time, don't you? But career, life, progress, a class ceiling. Don't know it's there till you hit it. Have you hit it? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So question number one, if you want, what is the working class? Who is Keir Starmer talking about? Is he talking about you? And how can he help? Question number one. Question number two, does this work as politics? Telling people that they are A, working class, and B, in need of help from people like Sir Keir Starmer and James O'Brexit. 0345 6060 973. And then number three, what is it? That's probably the question that interests me most. But when I'm not confident that you're going to answer the question that interests me most, I give you other choices. It's probably a bit self-defeating, that. So the question I really want you to answer is, what does the class ceiling feel like? When you're scootling up the ladder, making your way upstairs, and then thunk, head on glass ceiling, class ceiling, glass and class. What's it like? How do you know? How do you know? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. It is 21 minutes after 10. So Keir Starmer says his political project is to connect Labour with its working class roots. There may have been times in the recent past where Labour was afraid to speak the language of class at all, but not my Labour Party. No, for me, smashing the class ceiling that holds working people back is our defining purpose. I know that it exists, but I don't know what it looks like or feels like, and I would like you today to tell me. That was Keir Starmer's quotes, by the way. That's him writing an article for The Scotsman ahead of that by-election in Rutherglen and Hamilton West. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to tell me what when you banged your head against the class ceiling. All right, that's the challenge this morning, and we will embark upon that challenge in just a matter of nanoseconds. Just something a bit wrong with the switchboard. There we go. Tom's in Peterborough. Tom, what would you like to say?
All right, mate. Yeah. Basically, the question is about the class ceilings. I mean, in order to kind of hit your head against it, you have to kind of start climbing the ladder, no? So I think a lot of it is obviously got like two separate issues of people who try to rise out of their class, who are trying to, say, maybe progress in a certain kind of field and stuff like that. They feel that they're being, or they are being, like systematically held back and all that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of quite an important thing to also acknowledge is the fact that people like so if you come from a deprived area,
tell me what it feels like when you know that there is a door that is closed to you because of your class.
Well, it feels like trying to make a survive day by day. So the fact is, so obviously,
no, hang on.
I've never tried to kind of get a job that's professional, but I know people who have and stuff like that. I know people who are at universities and stuff. But I think a lot of it is where, like, for example, if you come from a deprived community and you look around and there's no aspiration, there's no services, there's nothing for anybody to do. A lot of it is to do with like people that even believe it's even possible.
So expectation and aspiration. You need to. So you go to a community, you go to a part of the country where people. The problem is even there, you can lean or immediately into patronising territory, but because I was about to say something like where people don't want to do, people don't do better than their parents, and you automatically think, well, what's wrong with how their parents did? What's wrong?
Yeah, no,
but you're talking about talking about people who aren't doing better than their parents' generation did.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is. I think it's just when you were talking about the ceiling, it kind of maybe muddies what I was trying to talk about slightly, ever so slightly. Yeah, it's like,
unfortunately, I'm in charge of what we're talking about.
Yeah, of course. I'm only joking. I'm not being serious, but I'm just saying.
So no, I like that. I like that. The absence. So I mean that actually works. I can see something substantive there. If you are growing up in an area, so you need to tell me what that's like. You need to tell me what it's like to grow up in an area where aspiration is not, because that is something I don't have any experience of, where you are not encouraged to think beyond your box. You are not encouraged to think. That's not a class ceiling, though. A class ceiling is when you've got momentum, you're moving forwards or you're moving upwards, and then thwack, you smack into it, and you know that you're being held back because of your demographics, because of your socioeconomic status. I want to know what that's like. 0345 6060 973, because it's possible Starmer's just got this wrong. He is actually, as a text here, this is coming from Keir Starmer, who has not got a working class bone in his body. He has. I mean, his background is diametrically different from the background of most of the not all, but most of the Conservative cabinet, and indeed most of Tony Blair's cabinet. He just comes across as what we would call middle class, but his background is absolutely of a piece with what he's describing today. But I wonder whether it's out of date. I just don't know whether it's there. Becky's in the Dordogne. Becky, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James. Long-time listener, first-time caller. It's really great to speak with you.
Likewise. Are you on holiday or do you live in the Dordogne?
I'm kind of a bit of both. I'm on a working holiday at the moment.
Lovely.
I took the opportunity to get some fresh air and some creative thinking opportunity. So I grew up in a working class area of Derbyshire, and I wanted to be a journalist when I grew up. and I went to a regular university. It wasn't one of the Russell Group universities. And after graduation, I tried and tried and tried. And even though I'd got work experience in lots of different areas, I could not get my foot in the door because I was expected to do an internship and effectively work for free, and I couldn't afford to do that.
Yeah.
So I had lots and lots of doors closed to me because of the lack of financial
there's a perforated line between class and cash, but that is 100% cash, isn't it? Although I suppose a different class, you might have had a godmother living in Pimlico who you could have stayed with while you were working unpaid as an intern. I mentioned that because that's exactly what one of my friends did.
But I think that as I've gone through my career, I definitely think that being in London, my accent, my Derbyshire accent, I've been sneered at because of it.
Really?
And the university wasn't good enough, so I definitely know that I was overlooked for opportunities because of that. But more recently, just the thing around class, part of the reason why I wanted to phone in was, so I work in communications these days, and I've been doing some work with a really great organisation called the Social Mobility Foundation, which exists specifically to get kids from these kind of backgrounds into top universities and top jobs. And I did some research looking at attitudes to class and understanding of class, and it's a really complicated area because we all define it in different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it to do with salary? Is it job? Is it culture? Is it our family history? Is it where we grew up or where we live now? You know, there's loads of factors that influence our understanding of it. And actually, more people claim to be working class than who actually are.
Well, how do you define it then?
Well, I'd say I come from a working class background.
What does that mean?
I grew up in an ex-mining community. Not many people. Like my dad was the first person to go to university, but he was a teacher during the 80s.
So that makes you, in my mind, that makes you middle class straight away.
Yeah, which yes, but also no.
So my dad didn't go to university, left school at 15, and we grew up in a former carpet community. But then I went to a posh boarding school. So I don't know who. Who in the context of what Keir Starmer is talking about, he's not talking about a university-educated teacher's daughter, is he? Is he?
No, I don't. Well, I don't know. This is the thing. Like, who is he talking to? Because a lot of middle-class people claim to be working class because they don't want to be deemed as privileged, because no one wants to think that they've got there because of.
That's why I'm trying to get
hard work and talent.
Exactly that, and I have some sympathy for that as well. But that's why I'm trying to get the question right today, because who is he talking about, and how can he help you? Is possibly a better way into it than just tell me what the class ceiling feels like. How could government policy have helped you avoid the setbacks you've described?
So back in the day, I'm talking 20 years ago now, when I was first starting out, paid internships,
just make
or
the legislation,
no internships, and actually just make accessing jobs easier.
But they'd still go to the people who knew someone's dad on the news desk, wouldn't they?
Yes.
And that may not be class.
Exactly.
That wasn't class in my dad's day because everyone came up through the regional newspapers, but these days the preponderance of privately educated people in the UK media is off the charts. So the people that will ask me to provide work experience for their children are people that I'm going to have encountered socially over the last 40 years.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things that the Social Mobility Foundation does, is try and create those networks for people and create those kind of opportunities where they get to work alongside and interact with people who might be able to open doors.
I trustee of a charity that does that as well, actually. I should mention the Andy Taylor Foundation in memory of my late friend Andy, who and we find people, I mean, literally, sometimes use me as the example. We want kids who are nothing like him. We want kids from the Northwest who have got absolutely no contacts or connections and who are desperate to work in media, digital media to start with, but we're expanding our net slightly. And the first cohort's one of the most magical experiences I've ever had. And they've all done brilliantly. Almost all of them have landed proper jobs in precisely the industry they wanted to be in because of the help they got from the charity. And that's when it becomes a bit more meritocratic. And just get that foot in the door. You need help to get that foot in the door. Other people who've had help to get that foot in the door, people like me, don't know they've had help. I talked yesterday about newspapers and nepotism, and my dad didn't get me a job in newspapers. But when I did manage to get myself a shift or two, I could go and introduce myself to someone who would know him, if not personally, then by reputation. And even that is, but that's not class. That's connections. That would be true if I was a plumber. It's and turning up on a building site, and there was someone there who used to work with my dad back in there. I don't know. That's why it's so confusing. So is Keir Starmer talking about you? 03456060973 when he says he needs to look after the working class. And if he is, what could he do for you? Because I don't know. I don't know if this is substantive policy. 10:31 is the time. Thomas Watts has the headlines. 10:34 is the time. Does Alexa know when it's coming out of the radio? When it says that, it doesn't activate. Oh, okay. Yeah, should have worked that out really off air. Sharon writes, James, I disagree with you for once. Well, we'll see about that, Sharon. I think working class people can be spoken to and thought about, particularly their hardships, without leaning on a differentiating other to demonise. The ceiling is there and the government's job is to address it. It might well reduce rather than produce xenophobia. This is something that's long overdue from the Labour Party. Our society is still class-ridden. Just look at the current government. I agree with all of that, Sharon. Let me just run something by you, because possibly to clarify what I'm trying to talk about. Social mobility is not a myth, but meritocracy is a sham. It is possible, though difficult, to come from a working class background and enter the elite professions, but sociologists Sam Friedman and Daniel Lorison point out in this innovative study, you will find it harder to progress and you'll earn less money, even when you have the same degree from the same university as someone with more privileged beginnings. In fact, on average, you'll earn £7,000 a year less. Right? If you're a black British woman with working class origins, the class pay gap for those working in top jobs is £20,000. Same job, same status, not the same salary. If you're a white upper middle class man, the path to the top is as smooth as ever. And this rather splendid that research looks at the question of how it happens, social reproduction at the top. I think most of us are pretty clear about what we're not, but are we clear about what we are? When he says, I'm going to look after the working class above other sections of society, is Keir Starmer talking about you? And if he is, what would that help look like? Jim's in Exeter. Jim, what would you like to say?
Hi there.
Hello, Jim.
I'm currently serving in the forces, and I can see a real difference in the class system there.
Well, definitely. I mean, to be fair, that's probably one of the few areas where there's not much mystery about it at all. If you go to a school like mine, you go to Sandhurst if you want to join the army, and you train to be an officer.
Yeah, well, it's slightly different because in my personal life, as I met my wife, and as we've earned money and saved and bought a house, we find ourselves quite middle class now in our personal lives. But I can see a ceiling in my professional life where I am one of the lads. Even though I've been in 20 years and my rank is not a captain or a major, and there's different rules. And it's very strange that the way I spend my money and the way way I live is clearly middle class. My personal life,
outside of uniform.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
how interesting.
As I joined, just a young lad, a teenager, no degree, but my wife, who has been a huge influence. You know, she got her degree from Laban in dance, and she's more into the arts than me, or was, and now we share that. But it's even down to the size of the houses in the military. Officers get bigger houses. It's down to what your wives can wear to balls, like Christmas balls, and how short their dresses and skirts can be.
Gosh, I suspect, I hadn't thought of this. I'm glad you were listening today. I suspect that the army is kind of one of the environments in which it's pretty clear where these distinctions and divisions are. In fact, I guess what I'm saying, Jim, is that the ceiling you're describing isn't glass. It's class, but it's definitely not glass. You know it's there. It's made of metal. It's not see-through, is it? You know exactly where it is. How do you know when you've bumped up against it? Have you got specific moments? I don't want to embarrass you or pry unduly, but when you know that someone's looking down their nose at you, perhaps, or that a promotion is probably not on the table because of the same reasons that might prompt someone to look down their nose?
No, I think it's the shock from certain people. Let's take I'm a colour sergeant, and let's say the rank of a major says, "What do you do this weekend?" And I said, we went for there's a lovely restaurant near us. It does a 9-course taster menu. And they would go, "Oh, you." But that sounds lovely to us. It's one of the things we like to do. We love, we live in Devon. There's some lovely restaurants here.
Yeah.
Or if we were to say, we went to see a ballet or went to the theatre, it's that and Major looking at the colour sergeant going, really? Are you not, sat in a park drinking Fosters or whatever they think what we're doing?
I think that says more about them than it does about you, doesn't it, in many ways? But that is the environment in which you're operating. So there's nothing that a prime minister or a government could do to change what you're describing, is there? Quotas maybe above, different ranks, quotas. I don't know.
I just think it's the military is military hasn't changed. Society has changed, and I think the lines are blurred now, and that needs to be represented more. A colour sergeant's wife having to wear a dress below the knee to a ball, and an officer's wife who is trusted to dress, better.
Is that true?
Yes.
Shut the front door. Are you serious? And what happens if she doesn't? What happens if your wife turns up with a dress above the knee?
She'll be asked to leave by the RSM, and I'm in the Marines.
I thought you might.
This is Marine specific, so it's because I don't know. Are the middle class officers trusted? Are they trusted to dress a bit more appropriately? They want some, working class sergeant's wife wearing a mini skirt to a Christmas ball. Yeah. So they put these rules in. I don't know, but it's things like that. It makes me cringe a little bit. I think, well, how dare you assume that we don't know how to dress for a certain occasion?
That's 90s Victorian, isn't it? Really, the whole
setup is, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're still set up to go to war in companies and brigades, and we don't fight like that anymore.
No, that is. I mean, absolutely fascinating. I'm a little bit lost for words, Jim, to be honest. It's because you've done the opposite of what I was asking. You've given a perfect illustration of really rigid hierarchical structures that are grossly unfair and probably the opposite of meritocratic. It's why we have the cliches of lions led by donkeys, isn't it? It's why you have the sort of Hugh Laurie officer being kept out of trouble by the rank and file.
Yeah.
Does it? I mean, has it got better, worse, or not changed at all during the course of your service? Over the last 20 years, I still see a divide. It's about the same.
So some are better than others. Some get it.
Yeah, of course.
However, now we have more people going across to what is called late entry officer. So you can, once you become colour sergeant, warrant officer, you then transfer to the officer ranks. But then you're like a different kind of officer. It's like new money, not old money.
Yeah. It's a beautiful analogy. Tom wants to know what would happen if you changed your name to Rupert.
Yeah. Well, it's again that's more of an army thing than a marine thing. That's not it's not a bit of a joke we use as much.
That's incredible, isn't it? Thank you, Jim. That's really, really helpful. I'm going to remember that bit about the knees and the skirts. I really am. It's 2023. Good Lord. Wayne's in Leeds. Wayne, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I was a bit nervous.
It's only me.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm a working class first person in my family that managed to get to uni. I went to quite a rough state school.
Yeah.
It was, I'd say for me, the thing that could really help was at the school I went to, it wasn't like these kids are going to go to uni. It was more as in we just need to get these kids jobs when they get out. There was no sort of career development in terms of aspirations. So I think the thing that I struggle with to get to where I've got to, I mean, I've qualified as a solicitor a couple of years ago now, and it was this lack of knowledge of how do you even get to uni? What do you even have to do? And obviously I didn't have any family contacts to discuss it with. The schools, to me, for people that are academic, or the kids, that are academic, it would be good if there was just much more of an open dialogue with either mentors, possibly. And so if Keir Starmer wants to help them, that's kind of, I guess, how he could do it. It's just sort of bridging the gap between, kind of coming from a family, for example, the academic work isn't really for them. If a kid is academic, it's just that sort of thing of giving them the opportunity.
And that's very much public policy, isn't it? That's very much an area in which the government could do more.
Sorry, James.
Well, you're more than welcome to interrupt me. I interrupt people all the time.
Yeah, so that would have been something massive for me. I mean, I think there was a bit of self-sabotage from my perspective because it just didn't seem like I'd ever get there. And then I just sort of eventually stuck with it, and then kind of.
Well, I mean, God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. That's a 19th century hymn, but it's being entrenched in 21st century schools. Go to a school like yours, and your experience was that the university is not meant for the likes of you.
Oh, hugely. Yeah.
What
absolutely.
changed? Who did you get your guidance from? Who gave you the help that you needed, if anybody?
I think. Yeah, so I mean, I did well in my GCSEs, and there was only a couple of us. And I think when it came to A levels, I tried my luck at this other college, and the ethos there was just so different. And I ended up actually messing up that year because I just had no clue what I was doing. But then I'd made some friends who had come from very different backgrounds, and they were very goal career oriented. So then I restarted my different college second year, started from scratch A levels again, and then they were obviously a year ahead of me, and I saw what they were going through, so I had them to refer to. So it was almost kind of, and then that sort of really spurred me on, to be honest.
You can't be what you can't see. So you saw their example, and
usually.
I mean, that means that means you're bright. You're a quick learner. It means you can assimilate. You can pick stuff up which other people wouldn't be able to do, but they'd have a better chance of doing so if there was someone at their school, their secondary school. That's really helpful to understand that, and it actually makes you realise. Some of the stuff, when you're much younger than me, so you probably don't do this, but when they announce something that didn't exist when you were young, and you think, oh, that's ridiculous these days, kids get everything actually, if a society is unfair, then you obviously need to be doing things in the future that you haven't done in the past.
Exactly. I mean, my niece now, she's doing well at school. She had, and I'm trying to pass that guidance to her as a way of sort of encouraging her, because I think she could do well. I mean, obviously, I think she could do really well, but she seems to be following in that sort of academic.
Well, but she's got an example. She's got her Uncle Wayne, who's a solicitor, which you didn't have anyone in your family who was a solicitor when you were going through that sort of process. That's fair, and you pass it on or you pass it back. That is I mean, that is quite an obvious thing now that Wayne has explained it so clearly. But that probably is what Keir Starmer is talking about. 10:46 is the time. It is 10:49, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Simon in Woking is very astute. Just think of the glass ceiling or the class ceiling as a barrier that you can see beyond. That's the point. So I got it completely wrong, didn't I, with the army when I was describing it as not being glass, because it's the polar opposite of that. Of course it is. You can literally see the stripes on someone's shoulder telling you that they are your superior, and that you can't get to that level because of where you started. So I do apologise for getting that so wrong. You can see where you want to go, but there are barriers in the way. That could be social, justice, prejudice, other obstacles stop you. So you need to smash your way through the glass barrier to get to where you want to go. Carl is in Reading. Reading. Carl, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
Big fan. I'm not that dissimilar to you. I was a working class sort of Midlands lad, and I got my way into print media.
Don't say that. I'm going to get crucified if you start portraying me as a working class Midlands lad. I mentioned that I went to public school at moments like this, because if I don't, I get 100 messages saying, why don't you mention where you went to school, posh boy? But I appreciate it's a little bit boring when I mention it a lot in the context of these conversations, but I cannot, for a moment, claim to be that, Cal, but you can.
Very fair.
Okay.
Very fair. So, similar to you, I got into journalism, print media journalism, entirely accidentally. Started sending letters to a magazine, won a prize, kept doing it. The editor said, stop sending me letters, start doing articles, and eventually got into it. Hey. And as I got more successful in life, I realised that the glass ceiling is essentially the safety net afforded by privilege.
Yeah, go on.
So I really realised this when I moved down to London after the entire print media industry collapsed after the 2008 financial crisis. I thought, got to go do something new. So went down to London and I got a job at a PR and comms agency. It was a real mix of classes, kind of from working class up to real top end. And I realised that my opinion of high class changed from someone who might have had an avocado at lunch to ordering a cortado to quadruple barreled names. And then I realised one of my colleagues, when they got laid off, they said, well, I'm going to spend the summer on a yacht in the Med.
Yeah.
And another colleague who's going through the same process had to get a job doing gig work driving vans.
Yeah.
And the better off colleague, he ended up starting a sports marketing agency. And it just means you have the safety net where things go wrong. The confidence.
And how much of it is cash, and how much of what you're talking about is class? And I know it's very hard to separate the two, but I think we should try.
Absolutely. I think it's the cash certainly helps, absolutely, but it's the confidence to take the leap. It's the confidence from knowing that things usually go okay for you. And if they don't, you'll be okay. And having the connections with similar people to get you there.
Yeah.
And, my friends from hometown might be able to introduce me to, a plumber or an electrician.
Yeah.
The friends these guys had could introduce them to Olympians and celebrities.
That's
and
interesting.
It's just a different world.
Yes.
And one of my most overriding feelings is just remembering that, for me, if I lost that job, I was a month or two from being homeless, and some of my colleagues who were upper class were a month or two from their next skiing trip.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, you could move back to mum and dad. You wouldn't be sleeping under a bridge, would you? But I know exactly what you mean. It's that I remember that angst from my 20s, and a lot of my friends would never have that because, there was a home in London. There was a flat in London where they would live. They didn't need to pay rent. They did completely different worlds. And I like the notion of a safety net because that's below people. And yet, for people who are below the safety net, it's a ceiling they can't. I think we may be over-egging the analogy here, Cal, but you started it. So I can't. I'm below the safety net, and I can't push through it to get to the next stage. The people above it, if they fall, they'll land on it, and they'll still be in a better place than I am.
Well, absolutely. It almost becomes a glass trampoline for them.
Yeah. I think I saw one of them on Tomorrow's World once. How are you doing now, if you don't mind me asking, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. I keep managing to leap out of failing industries and get into another one that's on the up. And I've been consulting for tech firms. I'm finally a homeowner on the ladder. And I've been able to get these things through taking risks and believing in myself. But there's been the potential for failure has been very great at these points. So I've had to take risks.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I kind of realised that society is compartmentalised, and it is a privileged thing. And people below the glass ceiling, they don't realise there is a safety net for people above. And equally for the people above, some of them were the nicest and kindest people in the world. They just had no conception of a world where if we lost this job, we would essentially have to not eat or not pay a power bill.
Yeah. We used to do phone-ins about how long would you have if the wheels came off, and we stopped because it was so terrifying.
Right. Well, I think the moment that you started being able to win your electricity bills on This Morning, it became a little bit too real.
Something of a milestone, wasn't it? Thank you, mate. I mean, also age comes into it as well, as you are in the process of discovering when you mention becoming a homeowner, because the 3 o'clock in the morning cold sweat about what the hell would you do if you lost your job. It dissipates slightly when you've got a bit of security behind you. It's a hell of a lot easier for me at 51 than it was at 31 when we were, recently married. And you'd think, well, what if it all goes wrong? What could I do if journalism went wrong? And I didn't have that safety net, and yet I was still considerably more privileged than most, or at least than many. Thank you, mate. Daniel's in Tunbridge Wells. Daniel, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
first time caller. Love the show.
Welcome. Thank you.
I just wanted to tell you about my brother-in-law who's from Liverpool, and his parents kind of made him go to elocution lessons when he was, I think he was about 16 or 17, because they knew his accent would hold him back.
Gosh.
He's actually, successful guy now. He's the COO of one of the top law firms in the UK. But he still recites, the exercises he had to do.
The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plane. That sort of thing.
My father's car is a Jaguar.
Well, his parents were quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Astute on the one hand, but I mean, if you can't beat them, join them would be another way of describing it, wouldn't he? Because they're indulging the snobbery that they knew he would encounter.
Exactly that. Yeah. His mother was a head teacher. His father was an accountant, but I think he was in the process of applying for Cambridge and studied accountancy law at Cambridge. And, got in. But no doubt he wouldn't have got on the way he did in his career unless he'd have been. If he hadn't
just been judged differently, even on pay. I mean, this research that I mentioned a moment ago is fascinating. It's just the same degree, the same university,
Yeah.
But different beginnings, you will earn less money, even if you end up in the same job. And that's kind of what they were preparing him for. So it's the signifiers. You march in there wearing a signet ring and talking about where you were shooting yesterday. You're going to come out with a bigger pay rise than you are if you march in with a Liverpool accent.
Well, that's it. I mean, I work for a big conglomerate, Siemens, and we have. There's definitely pay discrepancies which are published within our company, and we're trying to make it better every year.
Right, the fact that they publish it is an improvement. It's German owned though, is it? So it'll be probably slightly more meritocratic, no? Or is that me being very naive?
No, it is. It's German owned, yeah. So it's improving, and they're addressing it, but.
But it's still there. It's still there. And I love what Cal said about not knowing it, whether you're above it or below it. If you're above it, you don't know it's there. If you're below it, you probably do. But the people above you won't be aware of the fact that your head's bumping up. You can't unpick this completely, but I think we've done all right. Ahad is in Redbridge. Ahad, what would you like to say?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, hello.
Oh, so I think in terms of what Keir is saying, my personal opinion is that it's more a political stunt than an actual thing.
Had you heard about it before I mentioned it this morning?
I don't agree with. Sorry?
Had you heard about it before I mentioned it this morning?
What? Yes, I had.
The article in the Scotsman newspaper yesterday.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's something. I wouldn't say that it's not one of his things on the agenda, but it's the language that he uses and has used before.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's necessarily sort of a widespread empathy. I think it's more like, I will rescue you and come to me for there. And you were asking these questions from everyone of what you think he's meaning for the working class. And I think while he might have his own opinion, I don't think he wants to really define that, because he wants as many people to sort of do that. Now, I'm someone that I am a Labour supporter.
He did talk quite specifically about 0-hour contracts, fire and rehire legislation, living wage, making work pay, didn't he, in the article?
He did, but...
Well, they're really specific policies.
They are specific policies, and I think they do pertain to a lot of people, but I think there was also the implication that it's wider than that as well. And I also think that there's a very large portion of people that come under zero contracts too.
Well, yes.
I can't remember the statistics, but I think they're close to, I wouldn't say 1 million or more.
Yes, and the people that don't want to be on them would need help from government to not be on them anymore. I think
of course.
That's his. I don't quite know the point you're making. Forgive me. I'm sure it's my fault.
No, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Basically, I just feel like, because there's a lot of talk about the glass ceiling itself and how to crack that.
Glass ceiling.
Glass ceiling. Sorry, we keep talking about it, and it's there. And I think in terms of breaking it, or how Keir goes about doing that, I don't think we really understand, because I think, for example, the previous leadership, there was a larger sort of plan to do that. Rather than this one.
God, there you go. Now I know exactly what's going on. It's 11 o'clock. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. The Trump stuff is tasty, for want of a better word, but I guess we've kind of reached that point, haven't we, where it doesn't matter how much evidence there is. You still have a sense of there being something debatable. People sort of shout something about Hunter Biden while completely ignoring recorded footage of a defeated president trying to persuade people. Well, it's very, very interesting evidence, shall we say. And one of the things he's accused of is racketeering. I think I made a mild misjudgment at 9:59 this morning. I don't know that one homophobic attack outside a South London nightclub is grounds for wondering whether a government's expressed intention to stoke up culture wars is relevant. I could be wrong. Yeah, but I'll let you decide. Actually, I'm happy either way. But I think I could be wrong. I don't know that it is appropriate, possibly letting one's own political position influence one's treatment of a story that deserves to be seen in isolation. But I don't know. I'm not gay, so I don't know whether homophobia increases, the more that people are encouraged to attack trans ideology, for example. I don't know. I know that separating the T from the LGBTQ has been a very live and controversial issue, and therefore I don't know whether or not people who are being encouraged to look askance at the T will also feel a little bit more emboldened to publicly look askance at the L or the G or the B or the Q or the plus. I do not know, but I don't think that I don't think it was appropriate of me to knit the two together in the very first instance, as I did at 9:59 this morning. No one's criticised it or complained. I'm just thinking about it myself. I don't know. Julie suggests that there is perhaps hysteria giving permission to the haters. Hysteria around culture wars around trans people does give permission to the haters of other minorities. Yeah, maybe it does. We'll find out. Actually, let's do a phone-in, I think. 2 men were taken to hospital after being stabbed in a homophobic attack outside a South London nightclub. I think of Tony Benn at times like this. I know that sounds odd, but you know penny drop moments. You know how much we like a penny drop moment when you suddenly look at the world in a slightly different way because someone's helped you understand it. I thought that Wayne in Leeds was a bit like that today. Great callers all in the first hour. But Wayne in Leeds explained just the simple importance. It's not the first time I've heard it, but just something about the way he described it just made me go, God, yeah, of course. If there's no one at your school telling you that you could go to university, then you are probably not going to go to university unless something happens. And I had a penny drop moment when I read about Tony Benn reminding people that you never win. It's a constant battle. So, you know, if you want to see it in relatively Marxist terms, it's a battle, and to echo slightly elements of the conversation in the last hour, there is a constant tension between the owning class and the working class. That's probably the best way to distinguish it. There are owners and workers, and that is it. Everything else is gravy. But the constant tension between the owning class means, for example, if you win back rights, then it is not a victory. It is a temporary success because the other side will push back and try and take them off you again. It's not just an economic battle. It happens in society as well, in social issues as well. Look at Roe versus Wade. Look at the successful repeal of abortion legislation in America. So those victories for the progressive side of society are not permanent. You think they're permanent. I studied Roe versus Wade at A-level because I did comparative politics comparing America to Britain. I studied Roe versus Wade at A-level at a Catholic school where we were still daily encouraged to oppose abortion, oppose legalized abortion. And the sense was even there that the ship had sailed. You know, even as the monks were telling us that abortion was evil, the sense was that battle had been lost. And then the way it was taught, my politics teacher was a monk, would you believe? And very much taught with a sense of loss and regret. But obviously in America it was different. In America it was being taught as a temporary setback that we will overcome. And then it does. So it pushes back, you see? So I thought perhaps a few years ago that the days of public homophobia in London, I think there's probably some geography attached to this conversation as well, were in retreat. I hope they still are, but I don't know. I don't know, is the short answer. I see from social media, of course, as everybody does who goes on there, I see there is an emboldening of bigotry. People will happily now tweet things. I saw one yesterday, got picked up by quite a few people yesterday, suggesting that the refugees on the Bibi Stockholm, or taken off the Bibi Stockholm, should be put back on and gassed. And that's not abnormal now. In fact, you reminded me yesterday that when we talk about what Keir Starmer has to do to get elected, we have to remember that he's trying to get elected in a country where people routinely put laughing emojis on stories about drowned refugees. I think it's getting worse, but only through that very specific window. I see stuff that makes me wince, but then I remember that the person who's done it is literally trying to make me wince. Not me personally, although there are a few of those on social media, but just that's the reaction they want. They want the approval of fellow monsters or bigots or whatever word you prefer, homophobes, racists. But what they really thrive on, I think, is the disapproval of the decent. It's a sort of, I suppose, in a way, it's the social equivalent of Remainers' tears. You've got nothing to celebrate except the unhappiness of other people. And that's really probably the closest that the current Conservative Party under Rishi Sunak has got to an ideology. We just want to break things and hurt people. And our supporters will love it. They will celebrate. So what are we going to break next? European Convention on Human Rights. Brilliant. Get me the Daily Telegraph on the phone. We'll have an article tomorrow explaining why we've got to come out of the European Convention on Human Rights. And who else are we going to upset? Oh, refugees. Stick them on a barge full of Legionella. That would be great. Yay. So that's it. That's the ideology. And people love it. You know, they're still not doing great in the polls, but they're still around the 30% mark. There's still a lot of people out there loving this stuff, lapping it up. You've got 30p Lennox actually saying the quiet bit out loud when he says we've got nothing to campaign on, so it's all going to be trans and culture wars. And there are people, if it wasn't for social media, you probably wouldn't realise that they walk among you. They'd just be numbers on an opinion poll. There are people who love it, who lap it up. I remember the bloke. Do you remember the bloke when we talked about Trump a million years ago? And he rang in and said it out loud. Said, I know he's lying, but I love how much he upsets people like you and Sadiq Khan. What have I got in common with Sadiq Khan when it comes to Donald? Oh, we both think he's a disgusting racist clown. Yes. So the people who don't like disgusting racist clowns are your enemy. Why might that be? ... So I don't know is the short answer, but I think it's a timely moment to have a look at your relationship with homophobia. It was outside a pub where I think a drag performer had been on stage, or certainly was in attendance, a performer called Mary Mack, who tweeted, "It's shocking and disgusting that in 2023 this is becoming frighteningly more frequent. The team at the Two Brewers were incredible in dealing with this and keeping us inside the venue safe. Glad the victims have been discharged and hope they are with loved ones now to help." This followed an attack which the Metropolitan Police are treating as homophobic, searching for a suspect in the attack, which happened at about 10:15 on Sunday outside the Two Brewers on Clapham High Street. Is Mary Mack right? Is it increase? Are we seeing an increase in homophobia? And do you see it as a consequence of culture war? I think reading that quote now about the claim of an increase in it maybe does actually open the door to the thing I apologised for 10 minutes ago. I don't know. I don't know, actually. I'm going to put my hands on the table, put my cards on the table, say I don't know. I don't know if it is appropriate to ask that question. But I would like you to tell me, A, when it last happened to you, because that is one of those things where percentages matter. You know, the percentage of the population that is likely to be on the receiving end of homophobic abuse is small. But that means the rest of us probably have no experience or knowledge of what it is actually like. So, I mean, it's going to depend slightly on your age. But I just want to know two things. What happens? How does it manifest itself? Thankfully, stabbings are rare or attacks are rare. But, of course, the quieter stuff, the subtler stuff, the spoken stuff is going to be more common than the physical stuff, than the violence. But I don't know. Is it getting worse at the moment? For whatever reason? Well, there you go. Is it getting worse? And if so, why do you think it is? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Sadiq Khan. You've got to remember also that for a Muslim mayor to come out with all guns blazing on an issue like this is I don't know if courageous is quite the right word, but there will be plenty of members of the Muslim community who don't share Sadiq Khan's attitude and certainly don't think he should be getting stuck in quite such a bold fashion. But he wasn't pulling any punches. This is abhorrent, he wrote. There is no place for hate in London. It's a huge relief the victims are out of hospital. My thoughts remain with them and their loved ones. If you have any information, please do not stay silent. And he went further. It was a triple tweet, actually. I read it. And that I think as a Londoner, That is part of the story. That's what I meant by having a geographical element to it. Because it for a lot of people, if you're of my age, London would have been the first place where you saw men holding hands or women holding hands or kissing in the street. And I've always been really proud of that. And I don't know whether or not we should be worried about the clock being turned back. Only you can tell me. Okay? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. I don't know, a couple of you asking whether any government ministers have spoken out about it yet. I don't know. Actually, I wouldn't like to say that they haven't. There's nothing in the articles that I've read. But would you expect them to? I'm saying I don't know a lot this hour. It's very uncharacteristic of me. I don't know. I don't know if you would expect national level politicians to comment on a single hate crime. You probably, I'm trying to think of individual crimes that Suella Braverman did comment on. There was one last week, wasn't there? And there was some shoplifters on Oxford Street and she said they must be hunted down. So I'm sure she'll comment on this if she hasn't already. Positive. I had to check this because I missed the story and I thought it couldn't be true, but it is. Thank you to Julie. The UK has once again plummeted down the rankings of the annual Rainbow Map that reveals how LGBTQ-friendly European countries are. And we've gone from first. We were first for years. We were down to 14th in 2022 and we're down to 17th this year. Until 2015, we almost always came top. The UK was leagues ahead of other nations in terms of rights, protections and freedoms afforded to queer people. But from 2016 onwards, we've dropped down the list each year with now just 53.37 percentage points on the sort of scales of comparison, down from 86% in 2015. Now, I could read further into this article, into this report, and pinpoint precisely, or at least imprecisely, what might have caused this. But I wonder whether it would be more helpful to again ask you. So it's not just now a question about whether or not you think homophobia is on the rise, or whether or not homophobia in your life is on the rise, because you can only really answer this question from the inside, and then the why of it, of course. But if it's not linked to broader tides of politics or history, then why the hell have we fallen from 1st to 17th in the space of the last 8 years? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. James is in Cardiff. James, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Always a pleasure.
Likewise.
I just wanted to sort of talk about my own experience. So I'm 45 next month, and I remember sort of going to school, starting work, and how rife homophobia used to be. There's sort of being a milestone in the early noughties where it kind of sort of disappeared to the fringes. It was no longer socially acceptable to kind of be homophobic. And I fought for the repeal of Section 28, and I thought, great, we've come to a much, much better place now. I remember my friend Michelle, she's passed now, bless her, but she always said, don't think things can't go backwards. Don't think things can't change. Look at history. And sure enough, we've sort of seen, little by little.
Have you? You have seen it.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look around the globe, sort of whether that be in Russia or sort of other sort of far right parties, sort of making ground.
Yeah.
And then if you look sort of closer to home, just kind of language has changed. And
in what way?
I've sort of.
I'm not challenging you. I'm just inquiring.
So on social media regularly, it's now, your days are numbered, kind of just common threats now, whereas before I didn't used to get that. I've kind of seen it with kind of the rise in gender critical theory and sort of trans rights. I've seen a lot of sort of recycled homophobia kind of used against them.
You mean the same tropes and language directed at
just as we're all
trans people then transfers to gay people.
Yeah, just where like gay men were sort of labelled as they're paedophiles or they're they're that kind of thing. And I'm not a troublesome person on social media, far from it. But I'll sort of share sort of common issues, draw attention to things. But you see certain people burning pride flags and getting away with it, and it's just, I just worry.
You sound tired. You sound tired when you started talking about it. I don't know if you were up late last night, but just towards the end there was a fatigue in your tone.
I'm just kind of tired of the fight. I thought we'd come far enough, and it just seems like we're starting to go backwards now, and it's becoming, I don't know, it's becoming kind of the norm to just, sick of having it in our faces. And
that line, God, stage. I saw that the other day as well. That is I mean, don't keep privacy of your own home. Don't wave it in my face. Don't shove it down my throat. All that kind of thing.
And the fact that we're kind of labelled sort of promiscuous and I don't know, they're kind of just labelled as one thing. I've been with my partner 20 years, and we live quite a quiet life. But I don't feel like I can walk down the street now and hold hands, whereas I thought we could a few years ago.
I mean, I don't know what part of Wales you're in, but would that be
Cardiff,
pertinent?
Yeah,
so you're in
Cardiff.
town, you're in central Cardiff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
because I could see, I don't want to go all Matt Lucas on you, but I could see how if you were if you're in a little village, it would be a different proposition from
absolutely
but in a city centre. Final question, I promise. What? I mean, this figure here has actually thrown me a bit. I can't believe I didn't pick up on it at the time. This fall from first place in Europe to 17th. How would you account for that? If you can, you don't have to.
Or why it's happened?
Yeah, in this country compared to other European countries, because you mentioned the rise of far-right parties. They're in other European countries, and some of them are. And while that's been happening, we've been falling down.
But if you look at far-right rhetoric, it's become far more acceptable. If you look at the language from our government, again, I'm not just talking about gay issues, I'm talking about migration issues, I'm talking about race issues, and it's kind of, I've got a right to have my right-wing views. Everybody's got a right to have their views. Yeah. But when it starts bordering on, when it borders on hate and homophobia and racism, and people are just being more blatant, I think now.
Yeah, you might be right. A couple of you pointing out that some broadcasters regularly criticise police officers for even supporting pride events, but I mean, I don't think I've come across that. 0345 60 60973 is the number you need to put some sort of what we're looking for, detail, I guess. So these numbers are distracting me. Ireland's not much better than the United Kingdom, which surprises me. I don't know why. Spain, 74% is sky high on this, and Northern Europe, as you'd expect, similarly 76, 67, 68. 25 after 11, so there's three questions now. Has it got worse for you personally? Why do you think it's got worse for you personally? And of course, if it hasn't got worse for you personally, why do you think the United Kingdom has plummeted from 1st to 17th on an international, a European league table of LGBTQ plus friendliness? India is in Newcastle. I presume it's India Willoughby.
It is indeed, James.
How are you?
Pleasure to speak to you. I'm good, thank you.
Good.
It's very depressing hearing these figures, though, isn't it? 1st to 17th. I think the reason I'm just bringing it up, James, I'd just like to hopefully fill in some of your listeners on the background to this and what it's actually like to be trans, albeit that this is an attack on two gay guys. And essentially, homophobes never went away. They just had to button their lip for a number of years. They weren't allowed to say that because we as a society deemed it unacceptable. But unfortunately, the trans row, the trans debate, whatever you want to call it, came along, and that has given the homophobes essentially a new target because they are the same arguments. But this all goes back, actually, to around 2018, 2019. And in America, they have this thing called the Voters' Values Conference, which is a gathering of all the religious rights type of organizations over there. And they go and they barnstorm and they bang the Bible and they say what they've got to say. Donald Trump attended this particular one in 2019. And one of the key speakers stood up and he said, listen, forget about attacking the gays and the lesbians. They're too well accepted. They're too well protected now by laws. People know them. We work. They work with these people. They're friends with them. You are wasting your energy. The key to all of this is to go home and focus on the T. Separate the T, as you said in your intro. Separate the T from the LGB communities, and then you will end up having infighting, and it will start to crumble. And straight after that speech, you had various groups pop up, one notable one in the UK. Can I mention them?
Well, it depends what you're going to accuse them of, doesn't it?
Well.
But I mean,
okay, I won't mention them, but okay. I'll just say, let's just keep her at groups.
Well, you could say, I mean, separating the T from the LGBTQ is fairly explanatory.
Yeah, well, there is. I won't mention them, but it's fairly obvious then.
I just want to, as a caveat, and you're going to have plenty of time, I promise. I'm not being unduly cautious.
Oh, no, that's fine.
But there will be plenty of women who are uncomfortable about sharing their spaces with people born biologically male who are not homophobic and will be as disgusted by homophobia as you are or I am. But you're not. Just to be clear, you're not talking about them. You're talking about people who are just relishing the opportunity for revivifying ancient hatreds.
Yeah, that is correct. But there was another thing. We're talking about figures. If you there's been lots of surveys that actually most women are the biggest demographic that actually support trans rights. Obviously, Nicola Sturgeon, Emma Watson, Greta, all these Jamie Lee Curtis. They're all women, and they support trans rights. And I think this is another element where it's been pitched as women v trans, when actually it's the gender critical movement who kind of use, I'm just being honest here, they kind of use women's rights in speech marks as almost a cloak, a Trojan horse. And you see all sorts of
these would be the people that typify support for trans rights as misogyny.
Correct.
Okay. Because I found that confusing historically, but it's not confusing now.
Yeah. So it's we literally don't have time to go into it, so much detail. But essentially, you have a lot of bad actors in this who are flying under false flags, and superficially, they look like the goodies.
Okay, I understand that.
They're not necessarily the same. But on this, I just want to
steer it back.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a consequence of this speech, that's when it started to change, James.
Yeah, I saw Trump say something only in the last few months about how he can't believe how effective it is. I think he said something like, "You people don't care about taxes, you don't care about this, but as soon as I mention trans, you all go crazy." You're doing that thing of saying it out loud.
And unfortunately, here in Britain, we have the perfect storm of a government that is lapping this up. It's just
they've said that they're going to stoke it. Is it ridiculous of me to even contemplate conducting this conversation without including the trans conversation? Because because there might be gay people listening who will be thinking now, why are we talking about trans again? This was a homophobic attack.
Absolutely. And going the point I just want to finish about the conference after that speech. Obviously, you've had all the furor around trans people, and you can literally say anything about trans people now and get away with it. There won't be any consequences. But if you notice, that has now spread this last year, and this is where the gay aspect comes in. So it started with trans, just as they said in America it would, but it is now, after being fermented for 2 or 3 years, it is now percolating out. And you see attacks on drag queen story times. Now, drag is not trans.
No.
Drag is gay culture. And essentially, for me, thugs and bullies, they do not differentiate when you're out and about, whether you're gay or trans. You're a puff to them, or one of those other types of words. They're not checking who you are before they throw a punch. You're all the same. So that's just what I want to say. There is all the responsibility of, to me, as somebody who's trans, it's the government, it's British media who fan these flames in a horrendous way. And unfortunately, it's the gender critical movement. So it's those three components that have all come together. And you cannot control hate. Once you give permission to hate one group, it goes elsewhere. You see it with asylum seekers. It's essentially the same rhetoric. You're not welcome here. Stay out my space. You're not one of us. You're stealing our culture. You're erasing us. It's essentially all the same argument.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, India. It's 33 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thomas Watts is here now with the headlines. 36 minutes after 11. Come at it from whatever angle you please, but I am actually quite dismayed by that story about the so-called rainbow map, the Rainbow Europe map. Looking at how far the United Kingdom has plummeted in just 8 years, from 2015 when we were top of the tree for friendliness towards LGBTQ plus people to 2023 when we are 17th. I suppose if you've got people like 30p Lennox saying that this is what we're going to fight on, then that's a win, is it, for them? I'm not sure. 11:37 is the time. Sean's in Liverpool. Sean, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
good
mate.
morning. So, first-time caller, long-time listener,
Welcome.
usual sort of
All of that.
start to a conversation. So, I think what I want to say is I'm a gay male, 35 years of age, came out to my family, friends, colleagues, etc., when I was 18 years of age, predominantly worked my background in uniformed services.
Right.
But I have never, ever experienced homophobia. I've never been the victim of homophobia, and I can honestly say that living in Liverpool, growing up in Liverpool and working across the country, I've never witnessed homophobia either. And that's not to say that it doesn't exist and that people's lived experiences aren't genuine and real. But I think from my own personal perspective, the reason that I have never experienced homophobia or been the victim of homophobia or witnessed it is perhaps because of how I live my life. And I appreciate completely that we all are entitled to live our life however we choose to live our life. However, I do think that we do have to be, as a community, aware and conscious of the fact of how we present ourselves in public, shall I say.
Okay.
And I think that perhaps in some way, shape or form has influenced how I've grown up as a gay man and how I now live my life as a now great gay man without fear or challenge.
But it's going to be very hard for you to claim that you're not victim blaming. Albeit that what you've said about yourself is true. How are you not saying that it's their own fault for not behaving more like you?
No, absolutely, that's not what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is that I think that...
Because that is what people will have just heard. But possibly not everybody, but it's kind of what I heard, Sean.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think what we need to be aware of, what we need to be quite, conscious of is that, gay people come in all different shapes and sizes. We all come in different, guises, if you like. But what we aren't is we're not all the same. And I think that the few can have can control the narrative and the views of the majority by behaving in a certain way in public at times. And I think that's where sometimes you can stoke the fire a little bit.
But this is because you're a gay man saying this. It lands very differently from how Billy Buncher-Numbers on Twitter when he says, I don't care what you get up to in the privacy of your own home, but you don't need to be waving it in my face. You're saying the same thing, I think, but from very different perspectives.
But likewise, for example, I went to Liverpool Pride just a couple of weekends ago, and I witnessed some people dressed in costume and outfits that I would say is completely unacceptable and inappropriate for any setting in public, regardless of what your sexuality is.
Even at Pride.
Even at Pride,
which is probably. I don't dress in the way that you describe, but if I did, that would probably be one of the only places that I ever could.
Well, I don't know. If we were to slip it a little bit and we were to have an event that was for straight people, I would have complete offence and would have the same outrage towards a straight person.
Outrage is quite strong. Outrage is quite a strange thing to feel about other people's clothes.
But it's not about clothes. It's about wearing sexualised underwear and displaying yourself in a way which could be viewed as being almost pornographic, for example. Okay. And a community event which is Pride, where we have young people, we have elderly people, we have all people from all walks of life coming together to celebrate and champion gay pride. That actually that is in itself offensive. I feel, but I'm by no means, victim blaming at all. I'm just saying that for me personally,
well, I think you are actually. I'm gonna make a stand on that. I do think you are like a High Court judge asking a young woman why she was wearing a short skirt before she got attacked.
No, I disagree, because I'm not saying that.
How is it different? How is it different to say, not in the context of what you saw at Pride, but when you said, I think the ones, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were essentially saying, I think the ones that get attacked are too obviously gay.
No, absolutely not.
What then? What did you mean then?
What I meant is...
So let's use you as the example. What's the difference between them and you? Because you used yourself as an example of someone who's never even witnessed homophobia, never mind suffered it. So what is the difference that you're alluding to? The immediately visible difference that you're alluding to?
I mean, the immediately visible difference you could argue is, somewhat I don't, perhaps... push my sexuality in terms of the way I dress or the way I behave.
You literally just said that you were nothing like the judge criticising a woman who gets attacked for the way she dresses.
And I stand by that. I don't believe.
But you literally just said I dress differently from the ones that get attacked.
No, but I'm not. These two young men who were obviously the victim of.
Well, that's an ongoing investigation about which we don't know much. But I'm just repeating your own words back to you. You were adamant that you were nothing like.
I don't know what they were wearing, and I don't know whether or not they were targeted.
But you mentioned dress,
and I don't believe that they should be targeted for what they're wearing. So
you just mentioned dress.
No, I'm trying to distinguish between some people who are more out and proud than myself, for example.
I know.
It's not because I'm not out, and it's not because I'm not proud. I am out, and I am proud. And I do attend, the gay pride marches and events. But I think, what we need to be as a community is just a little bit conscious of, would we accept that from other groups in society? Would we accept certain behaviours?
What behaviours?
Don't confuse the two. Well, there has been, I've witnessed myself, and I can only speak on behalf of myself, behaviours at pride events up and down the country.
But we're talking about two lads outside a pub in South London. We're not talking about pride. I mean, that's a bit like comparing Carnival to a normal day. Everyone dresses differently at Carnival. Some of the outfits at Notting Hill Carnival don't leave much to the imagination. I think you'd be offended by them as well, which is a slightly different conversation. But you are. I don't want to badger you, but you are saying, don't shove it down people's throats.
No, so in response to the two young men that were assaulted, 100% I am appalled.
Well, of course you are.
I'm devastated for those two young men that they have suffered such, shocking violence, and I do not condone in any way, shape or form.
No, of course,
so
God,
please
no,
don't
you
try
don't.
and,
No, not at all. Well, listen, the High Court judge doesn't condone rape, but he still mentions dress when he's discussing it, and you just did as well.
I didn't mention dress of those two young men. What I said is that for me, as an individual, I personally don't believe that I have been the victim of homophobia because of the way I am. But I also acknowledge that we are all different and that we all have a right to live our lives.
Yeah, no, I think what you've said might be true, just so you're not under any illusions about what I'm saying to you. But for me, and I'm not gay, if the way people dress does make them more likely to be attacked, the people that we need to be focusing on and criticising are both the attackers and the society that somehow creates the idea that the way they dress makes them more of a viable target than people who dress differently. And we're on different sides of that argument, which is odd given our respective sexualities.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with what you just said, and I wouldn't, challenge what you just said at all. And I think it does come down to education. It does, I think, come down to how, people are, made aware of the differences within society. Be that gay people, be that black people, be that refugees. It is all about education. But I do think that, the community has a part to play in how we educate people. And,
you'd be in a very small minority in that community, wouldn't you? As a gay man that thinks people should dress more carefully.
No, I don't think people should dress more carefully.
What are you saying then, Sean? I don't quite understand why you brought dress into it.
Well, I didn't bring dress into it. I think you brought dress into it. What I said was that I'm not always identifiable as being a gay man, and that might be because of the way I dress.
Yeah.
Might be because of the way which I hold myself. Yeah. And, but I don't want to get into a bit late.
It's a bit late for that. I take on board what you say. And as I say, it's odd that we find ourselves on different sides of that position. But I do just, to be clear, I do come away from that conversation thinking that you sounded like one of those judges who thinks that the length of a woman's skirt is relevant to to her assault, because you did mention dress in the context of you not getting assaulted. And I think you might be right, but I think you're picking on the wrong problem, for the record. 11:46 is the time. It's 10 to 12. I didn't imagine it. I thought I might have done, but Donald Trump really did go there. And this is, one of those examples of him admitting it, when most people, of course, pretend that they're not doing exactly what he is admitting to doing.
I will keep men out of women's sports, okay? Who would even think that you could allow this? Who would say that this is okay? These people are sick. They're deranged. On day one, I will immediately sign a new executive order to cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, transgender insanity, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. It's amazing how strongly people feel about that. You see, I'm talking about cutting taxes. People go like that. Talk about transgender. Everyone goes crazy. Who would have thought 5 years ago you didn't know what the hell it was?
Oh, gee, that's chilling, isn't it? Yeah. I've just discovered this amazing new way of riling up people who are not in any way affected by the issue. And there he is saying it out loud. You can see he loves it. He can't believe it. He's like a kid with a new toy. And there it goes. Ah, crazy. I thought I'd imagine that for a minute. 11:51 is the time. Jack's in Wandsworth. Jack, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Sorry, I'm really nervous.
That's all right. It's only me.
Yeah, perfect. So can I just say, with all due respect, firstly, that you as a straight person, not to queer gay people as a catch-all phrase?
I was reading it. Of course you can. And I'm going to defend myself, but only very casually and cautiously.
Okay.
I was reading that verbatim from Pink News.
Oh, of course. That explains everything. Yeah.
Does it?
Because there is a growing and significant minority of us that actually are rejecting that term.
Fine.
Because queer community seems to be a distinct community and have different ideas about what men and women are and what sexual attraction is. But yeah, I just wanted to start with that.
That's fine. So in future, I shouldn't say it.
Not as a catch-all phrase.
No.
Yeah, that would be great. But obviously, I'm not.
I honestly thought that reading it directly from Pink News, I was probably going to be all right.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately,
but you live and learn.
Yeah, there's a growing and significant minority of us that support LGBT Alliance, and it's kind of sad what's happening. Okay. But just back to the conversation. So I think it is getting worse. In real life, it's a little bit worse, but it's definitely worse online. And I have American family, and I can see how it gets. This is making everything worse. The bringing of queer theory into the mainstream, especially in left-leaning parties and political discourses. And queer theory essentially argues that you can self-ID out of your biological sex, and that gender identity is what matters in life and law in society, as opposed to biological sex in all cases.
Yes.
Right. And so I can see in America this is used by the hard right as to why progress is so bad, and it wins over moderate. People that are left-leaning in every other analytic of power, they choose left-leaning parties, but they're being won over by the craziness of queer theory. And sadly, it's dysphoric trans people who make an effort to pass that are caught in the firing line as well as LGBT people in same-sex relationships. And I just think it's sad, really. And it also confuses straight trans people who are then under the belief that they can identify as gay or lesbian.
It confuses almost everybody. In terms of I'm not doubting anything you've said, but I am interested in the personal as opposed perhaps to the political or the philosophical. For you in Wandsworth, which isn't far from Clapham, how would you describe the change that you've witnessed in recent years?
The change. So it was about 2 years ago. I had a homophobic incident on a bus, and I was shouted at and called the F word and all sorts of things.
Can I bring Sean back into the conversation? He's not here, but how Sean might ask, how would that a homophobe have known you were gay, for example? I think he would have asked that.
With me, and I'm a sister as well, so I used to have a trans non-binary identity,
right.
And so I'm very visibly gay. I'm very camp now as to how I identify, and so I just wear it, right?
Okay.
Like my husband, you couldn't tell, but with me, I am very gay.
Right. Okay. and so the homophobe on the bus just picked up on that, and therefore attacked.
I've always, it sort of went away, but I noticed some odd looks now, and I've toned down my gender a little bit just when I feel uncomfortable, which is new. I never used to do that. I came out very young, but I definitely think online it's just gone crazy, really.
And that bleeds into real life. That bleeds into real life, doesn't it? You can get away with, not massively or immediately, but it just it changes the notion of what's acceptable and what isn't. Publicly.
That's it. And the scary thing for me, as I've always been involved in left-wing spaces, socialist spaces, it's now impossible. And I get so much homophobia from them because I have my views that I do, and I've desisted, and it's just really difficult. And I'm pro-transsexuality as well, so I have many trans friends that agree, and it's like, it's just a mess.
How naive is it for me? Because you picked me up at the beginning as being a straight man and therefore not qualified to go to certain places, and I agree with that. I'm speaking verbally, not geographically, although I think that conversation has changed slightly in recent years. But how easy would it be if I held different views? How easy would it be to conduct a conversation about homophobia without mentioning trans? Would it be pathetic waste of time?
So I'm struggling there.
Right now, talking about a rise in homophobic hate, which I think we are talking about.
Yeah.
Can you separate that from the rise in transgender awareness that Donald Trump just referred? He literally just said 5 years ago no one knew what this was all about, and now it's like one of his greatest hits. Can you separate the two?
You can and you can't. So you can in that there's a difference between transsexuals, dysphoric transsexuals.
No, I know all that. I'm sorry. I just when I say trans, I mean transgender. But in this context, because that's what Donald Trump was talking about. He was literally saying, "I've found something now that 5 years ago I didn't know anything about, and all I have to do is mention it, and everyone goes nuts." And in that same window, it would appear, certainly looking at this map of Europe, it would appear that homophobia has increased as well. And I presume some people would like to keep the two separate. I'm just wondering whether you think that's possible.
I actually don't think it's possible, no. And I think it's really sad, and this is why I support the LGBT Alliance, but I'm very much LGBT and transsexual, pro that. But I think this coincides with the rise of queer theory and transgenderism and the homogenization of the supposed LGBTQIA plus community. We have nothing in common with each other. It's just
that idea that except you do in the minds of bigots, Jack. Isn't that the point? That we're both? I think we're having slightly cross-purpose conversation, but for a bigot, the fact that you're different, it makes you a target. And it does. I mean, you can talk about the homogenous, the unfair homogenous nature of the LGBTQ plus assignations, but for a bigot, particularly the kind of people who are lapping up what Donald Trump's selling, they don't care about all these distinctions that you're making. It was India, wasn't it, who said, "I'm going to repeat what a previous caller said. You're either a puff or you're not a puff," and that's what they're looking for: reasons to hate.
I don't think that's true. I think there are moderates that are being won over, and I've experienced it. We can talk about
maybe, of course there may be, but we're talking about the bigots. We're talking about Donald Trump's fans. He's not winning moderates over, and for them, I don't know. I mean, obviously, you know a lot more than I do about the rainbow, but I think in the context of hate, if you're a hater, you're not making these distinctions, really. If you're a moderate, you're not a hater. Maybe I've misunderstood you, in which case I apologise. I just want to squeeze in at least one more caller. Charlie's in Manchester. Charlie, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello.
I'm a gay man, and I've never really suffered any issues, one homophobic incident. My question is, is it likely that the UK was just ahead of the game previously, and potentially other countries are improving a bit faster than the UK? Because I personally don't see any real issues. I think
I don't know. I mean, we've gone from 1st to 17th, so I mean, there's going to be something. There's going to be a negative direction of traffic attached. But you're right. We may have been so far ahead of them. Well, hang on a minute. You want to stay ahead of the pack, don't you? Or at least be first equal. Not to go from 1st to 1st equals okay, but from 1st to 17th is a slightly different proposition, isn't it?
Yeah, and all I can say is from my experience,
yes.
I don't know how that has happened. When I watch TV, there's lots of gay storylines, and that wasn't a thing.
It's easier to come out in 2023 than it was in 1993.
It absolutely is. And I don't understand where this information has come from on this report, but I really do think things are improving, and potentially just other countries are improving faster.
Can I say something odd? I don't know if it's odd or not, but you heard Sean, the previous caller. He was a copper as well. You were a copper, I think.
I was a cop for 6 years, and I must say I dealt with very few homophobic incidents. I was a cop in Manchester city centre, which you'd expect to be quite a lot of incidents.
Would you?
Well, you would, because there's quite a big gay community.
Well, that's
in
what
Manchester.
made me think there were fewer. I think you're more likely to get an incident if you're in an environment where it's not normalised and where it doesn't happen. I don't know, obviously, but I used to spend quite a lot of time when I lived in Manchester by the canal, and I would have thought that a homophobic incident there would be rarer than it would in Kidderminster, where I grew up, for example. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with what you said earlier on about the only gay in the village type thing. But,
I didn't actually say that out loud, but everyone knew what I was talking about.
We all know what you meant. And I've never experienced that, but when you've got a higher concentration of gay people, you would probably expect more incidents.
I suppose. Yes, there's more targets, isn't there? Therefore, you'd expect more shots.
Absolutely, and I would say that I didn't come across it very often.
You know why that is, mate.
It does happen.
That's because you know what happened on the 8th day. That's when God created Manchester. That's a reflection on Manchester. That's not necessarily on social mores. Thank you, mate. Maybe a tiny bit late for the news. It's 12:01. It is 5 minutes after 12. This is going to be pretty grim, this conversation. I want to warn you now. We're going to talk about the footballer Mason Greenwood and his mooted return to Manchester United. I really, really recommend. I don't do this very often. I often refer to articles, but I don't very often say, please read something. Please read the article by Jonathan Liu in The Guardian today under the headline Mason Greenwood and what will really decide if he plays for Manchester United again. It is an absolutely superlative piece of writing. This is a much more complicated issue than you realise, because I think the most complicated issues are the ones that people who are diametrically opposed to each other think are simple. See, for me, this is quite simple. But I know for an awful lot of people, there will be a desperation to believe that it isn't. And in fact, that's probably not fair, because I'm accusing you of insincerity. If I were a Manchester United fan and Mason Greenwood made his way back into the team, I would never watch that football team again. It wouldn't even be a moment of contemplation, right? But I'm not a Manchester United fan. In fact, I do not have the fanaticism that some football fans have. I love my club, but not in a way that defines me. And this is what I mean by people not understanding what's going on. You would, good God, footballification of football. I haven't mentioned footballification for ages. I think I'm going to finish the new book tonight, by the way, and so everyone celebrate. The first book actually, How to Be Right in a World Gone Wrong, Sunday Times bestseller, available still from all good bookshops, talked about footballification. I think of all the nonsense I've come up with on this programme, footballification is among the best. And it simply described, nothing new about it, just a new name. It simply described wearing a scarf so tightly around your neck that it's cut off the flow of blood to your head, right? You cannot conceive of somebody on your team doing bad or somebody on the other team doing good. And that's happened to politics, largely because of Brexit. Brexit has essentially footballified. But it's changing now. You've got the numbers now are going, people are tearing their scarves off at a rate of knots. In fact, people are tearing their scarves off so much. Even the Telegraph has to report today that 1 in 5 Brexit voters wants a new referendum in the next decade. But for a long period of time, on both sides of the Atlantic, you had a serious issue of footballification. So unless you understand, I think, everything I'm saying now is up for criticism, all right? Everything I always say is up for criticism, but this is very, very subjective. I'm not sure I can claim to speak for anybody else, but I presume people who are comfortable with Mason Greenwood going back to work, let alone going back to his club, is doing it either because you are a dyed-in-the-wool United fan or simply because you're imagining how you'd feel if he played for your club and my club right or wrong, that your loyalty to your club is such that you will never, ever look a gift horse in the mouth. And he's a brilliant player, plays off both feet, shoots off either foot. And the manager apparently is open to having him back in the squad. A competition in the forward line would be useful. And they're paying him $75,000 a week on a contract that's still got 2 years left to run. He may even have grounds for a legal challenge if they decided to terminate it, but that is avoided by carrying on paying him. If you don't know who or what I'm talking about, I need to give you a trigger warning. I need to warn you that we are about to describe an audio recording of a man abusing a woman and attempting to coerce her into sex. Okay? It is now more than 18 months since the harrowing audio emerged of a man alleged at the time to be Greenwood, abusing a woman and attempting to coerce her into sex. The woman also posted pictures of her bleeding face and bruised body, suggesting that Greenwood had inflicted her injuries. Criminal charges against Greenwood were dropped after key witnesses, and I quote, withdrew their cooperation from the investigation. Those quotes are from the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. But the audio is still available. Indeed, Nick read it out this morning. You can go and listen to it whenever you want. You can draw from that audio whatever conclusion that you want. And then Jonathan Liu writes in The Guardian today, and if you can draw whatever conclusion you want, and if the conclusion is that Greenwood should not be playing football for United, then congratulations, you are exactly one step ahead of where one of the world's biggest clubs finds itself. Now, I did describe it as a complex issue, which Jonathan Liu takes issue with. He says, of course, it only has to be if you want to complicate it. I meant it's a complex issue for people who think it isn't. For people who think it's an incredibly simple issue, which it is. But some people can't understand why anybody would want to complicate it. It will largely involve you not understanding the nature of the original footballification. The way in which, if he is playing for your team, then you don't care what they do. It is a tiny little bit like having 11 Donald Trumps on a football pitch, where every single one of them could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single supporter in the crowd, as long as they're winning, or as long as they're looking good. This is me speaking now. This is my opinion. Okay? My opinion is that Manchester United should not allow him back into the team. I don't know whether you're going to try to sway me by suggesting that if he demonstrated profound remorse or became a poster boy for transformative therapy, that the picture would change. I'm going to invite you to... in fact, quite a few of you are suggesting I need to read out the audio of what was actually on the tape as well, which I'll take your guidance on that, and I will do, because that's how this programme works. I can only say this. I can only say that were I a Manchester United fan and Mason Greenwood came back into the side, I would never, ever give them a penny of my money again. I don't know if I could stop being a Manchester United fan. I think that sometimes these loyalties are so embedded in our consciousness that they are impossible to remove. But if the current regime were to return this man to this team, I'd be gone. They wouldn't notice. They wouldn't care. It'd be like the time I tried to embarrass the chief executive of Woolworths by boycotting Pick and Mix. It wouldn't make the blindest bit of difference to anything except my conscience. And I couldn't do it. I'll tell you one example of me growing up a bit is you'll notice I don't now stick as a dad in convo. It's got nothing to do with being a dad. It's got something to do with being a citizen and something to do with being part of a society. And you cannot be a responsible part of a society without objecting in the strongest terms to the idea that this man should return to Manchester United. So what question am I going? And again, a lot of you telling me that he hasn't shown any remorse at all, which callers were telling Nick as well. So I think that you need today to explain to somebody who doesn't know anything about football right? That's not me. I will be the conduit through which this conversation passes. How there can even be a conversation occurring in this country about whether this man should be returning to this football team. I will share with you the grimmer detail of what was on this audio recording shortly, because I think it is relevant. But know this, it was a man abusing a woman and attempting to coerce her into sex, refusing to accept that she had any right whatsoever to refuse his demands, and pictures posted subsequently of the woman showed a bleeding face and a bruised body. You imagine now, if you can, somebody listening to this agog at the fact that we could even be, that the British media, so it's not just us, it's a big conversation, could be both siding this. There you go. It's amazing how often Donald Trump pops up, isn't it, in conversations about sexual violence. Oh, and of course, there he is, being a convicted sex offender. But imagine somebody who is listening to this or reading this today in the newspaper and across the detail, thinking to themselves, how can anyone be both siding this? I don't know. Are you going to go for innocent not until proven guilty? I just don't know. But how can this be a conversation? That's what I want you to do. I want you to tell the person. I don't think we're going to argue. I'm more interested in canvassing contributions. You need to explain to someone who cannot believe that anybody anywhere is proposing the notion that there are two sides to this argument, why this conversation even exists. Do you see what I mean? And I'll say it again. And also, the best way to do this is you're a Man United fan or a football fan, and you would have him back in the team. And then we can have a bit of a set too, although keep it clean. Because I don't get that, actually. I don't need to use an imaginary person for this bit of the conversation. If I were a Manchester United fan and Mason Greenwood went back into the team, that would be it for me. I would be tearing up my season ticket and sticking my scarf in the bin. How can you possibly hold a different opinion? I could do that every day as a topic question. How could you possibly hold a different opinion? But on this one, for me, it's pretty close to a no-brainer. 16 minutes after 12 is the time. The number you need, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I don't think that the subsequent restoration of the relationship, which Ian in Windsor alludes to very politely, I don't think it. No, you just asked the question. I don't think it changes anything, mate. To tell you the truth, because what you have witnessed is behaviour, alleged behaviour, and what you have witnessed is criminal charges being dropped after key witnesses withdrew their cooperation from the investigation. So if the accused and the key witnesses have subsequently rekindled their relationship, it changes nothing about what was on that tape or what was in that recording. So how could anybody possibly want this man in their football team? 0345 6060 973. It is 12:19. Another element of the story that truly beggars belief is news this week that Manchester United are consulting their women's team over whether to let Mason Greenwood play for the club again. Actually, as I say those words out loud, I said, well, does it beggar belief? Maybe you think that's the correct way to approach such matters. It might be nicer for them to consult every woman at Old Trafford, from people working in the kitchens right up to if there are any in the boardroom. But I don't know. Anyway, so there's the story. There you have it. Shall I? I think I need to. All right. This is gross. If you've got kids in the car, you need to turn me off for a minute. All right. It will only take me a couple of seconds, and I'm going to obviously sanitize some of the language that's used. But this is the audio believed to be between Mason Greenwood and his girlfriend. It begins with him saying, move your legs up, I stress again that this is a proper trigger warning, okay? A lot of people pretend or don't understand what a trigger warning is. If you're likely to be reminded of a grim experience by the transcript of what appears to be an assault, then this will remind you of it and therefore trigger you. So please be warned. Move your legs up, move your effing legs up, to which the woman replies, no, I don't want to have sex. And he says, I don't give a bleep what you want. Shut up talking to me. Stop. And she asks him to stop putting his penis near her, to which he replies, I'm gonna bleep you, you bleep. She says again, I don't want to have sex with you. And she says, I don't care if you don't want to have bleeping sex with me. Do you hear me? That's just a tiny bit of it. And charges were dropped after witnesses withdrew, and Manchester United are currently contemplating his return to the first team, and even suggesting that in order to do so, they must first consult the women's team, some of whom will be a little bit busy at the moment, getting ready to play Australia tomorrow night. 21 after 12, Andy's in Glasgow. Andy, what do you think, mate? What's going on?
It's just, hi James, first time caller. It's just disheartening, isn't it? I think I want to come back to an earlier point you said about it sort of being, how could we be considering this in this country?
Yes.
It's broader than this country. Manchester United are one of, if not, depending on who you ask, the world's biggest football club.
Yes.
The fact that, I think I read something the other day, that the actual time that this was, in any sense going through legal proceedings is nowhere near as long as Manchester United's own internal investigation has taken.
Right.
How long or how many times do you have to listen to that audio to be able to see there's a problem? And that's my main gripe, comes from seeing, one of the best things about football fans is that you're going to disagree with each other. It's where all of the conversations and discussions come from, whether that's rivals, whether that's people who support the same team as you. If you can somehow find yourself in a place reading opinions of the people.
Oh, I think the phone line's gone. My apologies. Are you back?
Hello?
Are you still there? I just lost you there, reading the opinions of the people.
Sorry.
And then you went.
Yeah. Okay. All I was going to say there is it's disheartening, because that sort of attitude and just, I guess, flagrant disregard for reality. I mean, how you could hear someone speak to someone else like that and say, oh, we all make mistakes. A mistake is leaving your keys in the door or accidentally forgetting to turn the hob off.
So are you a football fan?
I am indeed, yeah.
Who do you support?
So Manchester United, through my dad.
And Celtic.
No, Dundee.
And Dundee. So, sorry, a bit of lazy stereotyping there on my part.
I'll forgive you.
So thank you. So to someone, you're immune then from the, if you like, turbocharged tribalism that will prompt some people to defend him. It's deeper than that, isn't it? It's not just about football, but for someone who can't separate the two, explain to them what a Manchester United supporter cheering for Mason Greenwood's return to the team is doing today. How are they managing to pull that off?
I don't know. I mean, I'm perhaps too cynical for this, because I refuse to believe that you could be that blinkered by, I don't know, the goals that he brings, or and more to the point, I think what a lot of people forgetting about his potential imminent return to the team, the guy hasn't kicked up football in a professional setting for quite a while now. There is no guarantee, even if you were to completely abandon all morals and say, yes, I want those goals in the team, there's no guarantee. Like, he could come back a shell of his former self. So, no, I think it's the cynic in me says that it's a far deeper societal problem in the way that.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right. So that could be it then. So actually, we're giving them a bit of a break by confining it to footballing. It's actually about attitudes to women and sexual offences.
Oh God, yeah, and
it's not that big a deal. Therefore, he should be allowed to come back and play football.
You'd be amazed, James, and again, this is from someone who is constantly reading news and opinions about Manchester United being a fan. You'd be amazed at the number of people around the world, all different sort of cultures, backgrounds, and settings, who will parrot that line of "we all make mistakes, give them a second chance." And again, that's why I came back to my earlier point that that's very, very different views on what constitutes a mistake.
Of course, you're right. But isn't it? I mean, there is an element of chicken and egg there, isn't there? Because because what you're doing with the second chance line is fitting your deep desire to see him back in the team to the facts as they are available. Do you know what I mean? It's not. I don't know that it's. It's arrived. You've arrived organically at the conclusion of the second chance line, and that's the tension here, isn't it? Is it just because it's about football, or is it because of our attitudes, a society's attitude, or members of a society's attitudes towards this sort of behaviour, this sort of offence?
It's a good point.
I don't know the answer, and that we can add that to the list as well. Andy, thank you. 26 after 12 is the time. Sean's in Ladbroke Grove. Sean, what would you like to say?
Afternoon, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
I mean, I'm a fanatical Man United fan.
Of course you are. You live in Ladbroke Grove.
No, I like that. But also, I'm also a father of 2 daughters, got 3 sisters, so it's a tough one. But the angle I'm coming at this is more of, is it a problem that he's playing for Man United? Is that the problem?
No, I think it would be a problem if he played for anybody. But at the moment, the decision is Manchester United's because he's under contract for another 2 years.
Okay, and obviously it's a girl that he was with from school. He made a huge mistake. So should his future employment be completely terminated for a mistake he made at 18 that he wasn't charged for?
Yeah, I think he was charged. He was charged, but he wasn't convicted, and that's a crucial point that you make.
I haven't heard one person come online to say, you know what, he's 18. Maybe we need to help him or do this.
No,
nothing.
but to be fair, this is the
extermination for this kid.
Sean, you're the second caller, and you're making precisely the point you're saying that no one else has made. So it's now 50-50.
Okay, well, fair. That's good. Fair enough.
That's not an opinion, mate. That's counting.
It's not fair, though.
What do you mean it's not fair? I mean,
the level of vitriol against this guy when people make mistakes and are given second chances every day.
It's not really a mistake, is it? As the last caller said, a mistake is accidentally leaving your keys in the front door.
Yeah, but we don't know their sexual relationship. This is what I mean. There's a lot in this story that hasn't. We don't know their sexual relationship. This is his girl from school.
Yeah.
Yes, it's abhorrent what he done, and this is a huge learning curve for him. But it shows that he's actually now gone on and had a child with the same girl.
I don't know.
Something.
Well, no, it tells me nothing, of course, because victims of domestic abuse very, very often don't leave the scenario.
He was 18. He made a mistake. He's been punished severely for that mistake.
Well, he's been on 75 grand a week throughout, I think, hasn't he?
Yeah, but that's to do with his talent.
So what's the punishment? Is the punishment?
He's on 70. So if he was on £8 a week, would that be all right then?
No, I'm just talking about punishment.
Well, he's been stopped from doing what he.
Yeah, but a punishment would be a punishment. But punishment would. I mean, I'm just pointing out that there could have been much more stringent punishments, perhaps. I don't know what the legal.
And if there was a case to answer at court, there would have been. That's my whole point.
Not without witnesses, Sean.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. How many things of people about witnesses? That's what. If the witness wants to go forward, that's down to the witness.
Yeah. And they didn't.
So why is everyone else?
You've already answered that question.
Why is everyone else become judges and juries? I don't get that.
It's not judges and juries. No one's suggesting that he needs to be imprisoned or.
Yeah, but you're suggesting that he shouldn't work.
Yeah, because you're seeing it from the wrong end of the telescope.
Why shouldn't he work again? Why? I don't get it.
You're seeing it from the wrong end of the telescope. Manchester United should not.
Oh, so it is Manchester United. That's my point.
Or Rovers or whatever club you want to talk about.
I mean. So you're saying that he should stop work because he's a footballer. So he'd have to play for someone.
I'm saying that no organisation, even if he wanted to go and work for Rent-A-Kill, should be associating themselves with somebody who's done what he's done.
So he should stop work. He should stop his profession. That's what you mean. Yeah,
yes. Sorry, I thought that was clear. Okay.
How can he stop work at 19? I don't get that.
All right. Well, what if he was 30?
Does it, as I say...
What if he was 42?
To me, that's a big difference. That's a big difference.
Okay, so it's his age.
Somebody doing something at 18, and you're telling them that you want them to never have a job again, is a bit, extreme.
When you say someone, you're kind of evading the central point that this is a man who has done what he did. This isn't just someone. This is someone who was recorded abusing a woman and attempting to coerce her into sex. A woman who was allegedly subsequently posted pictures of her bleeding face and bruised body. So I mean, would it be fair to ask me? I don't know how old your children are. Would it be fair to ask me
wrong from my point?
how you explain?
What he done.
How do you explain to your daughter why he should be back on the team?
Yeah. What I would explain to my daughter is,
go on.
He's made a huge mistake. Look at what this idiot's done.
Right.
He's been given a God-blessed talent.
So what's the punishment?
Oh, he's not played for nearly 2 years.
No, moving forward, what's the punishment?
He's not played for nearly 2 years.
Yeah, that's moving backwards. If he's back in the team tomorrow, moving forward, what's the punishment? What's the penalty?
Well, penalty for what? He hasn't been charged with anything.
You just said yourself he's done a disgusting thing.
Yeah, he's done a disgusting.
So what's the punishment?
People do disgusting things every day.
So we don't want to encourage them, Sean.
Have to stop work.
All right, mate. Okay. So no punishment at all.
Donald Trump's just been found guilty.
I'd be supremely comfortable to see him prevented from ever working again, Sean. It's possibly you could have picked a better example. I don't fully understand the point that you're making. Where we differ is that I think this sort of conduct should be career-ending, and you don't.
He's a mug. He's a complete mug.
Yeah, but just want to part on agreeing to disagree. I think this conduct should be career-ending, and you don't.
No, I don't.
That's it. Okay, you said it. That's good. Amelia Cox has the headlines. It is 12:35, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I suppose, I mean, some of you suggesting I should have asked the last caller how he'd feel if someone very close to him had been on the receiving end of Mason Greenwood's behaviour. I'm sure he's thought that through. The problem really is trying to work out whether this is a football problem or a society problem, a social problem. And I think it's both, but I don't know what the ratio is. I don't say 52-48. Andy picks up on this, saying it's societal. Remember, the Me Too movement was based on similar questions with Harvey Weinstein using his position to abuse women. Greenwood needs rehab, but there also have to be consequences for his actions, and he should never play for Manchester United again. And he picks up on the notion of toxic masculinity being on the march at the moment, and references the alleged people smuggler Andrew Tate. Man, I just think it's a no-brainer, and I don't think I've got the arguments for people who don't think it's a no-brainer, because there aren't any. It's just something, it's coming from somewhere other than the brain. I think. T's in Kingston. T, what would you like to say?
Oh, James, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm so annoyed. My heart is literally beating on my chest. Because, for me, anybody who can defend him is willing to accept that behaviour. Okay? Yeah. To quote David Morrison, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. If you can accept this sort of, let's call it behaviour, and say it's just a mistake, that means you would do the same thing. No means no. End of story. Full stop. No further conversation.
Listen, I'm not going to argue with you, but I don't think it means you would do the same thing. I just don't. I don't know why I think that. I don't think people sticking up or wanting Mason Greenwood back in their football team would necessarily, well, not even necessarily. I don't think it's fair to say that they would all do what he did. You can say that they're excusing it or condoning it, but you can't say that
they're definitely condoning.
Yeah,
they're definitely condoning it. Definitely. I'm not saying he should be locked up forever.
No one's saying that. No, it's career-ending.
However,
career-ending. You can have a career-ending injury. There should be such a thing as career-ending conduct.
Absolutely. And that's what it is. For someone in the public eye who is representing this club, his behaviour is not acceptable. And they should actually be leading with that as the biggest club in the country. And I say that as a football supporter.
Yes,
of course. As the supposedly biggest club in the country. That's what they should be leading with. They should be leading from the front against it.
I think this might be one of those true never the twain shall meet moments, in that it is to you and to me and to the vast majority of people getting in touch. It's an absolute no-brainer. And the last caller won't be the only person who thinks it is nuanced or thinks it is complicated or thinks it is complex and reaches for reasons to support that position. But the twain is never going to meet, is it? No one's going to listen to this and change their mind. They've listened to the words that he said and the things that he did, and where that leaves you is where you stay, I think.
if the consequence of his action means that he no longer plays top-level football, then those are the consequence of his actions. They're his actions. Those are his words. And he should pay the consequence for doing what he did.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, what would those consequences be? End of career, end of the. That's it. End of the road. And there's nothing complicated about that, or nuanced, or complex. John suggests it's the footballification of sexual assault. I think it is. I think that most people trying to defend or excuse this would be Manchester United fans, but there'll be some who aren't, I think. 12:39 is the time. T, thank you. Lisa's in Cannock. Lisa, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I completely agree with the last caller. He should face the consequences if it was a different crime in a different place. An 18-year-old doesn't make a silly mistake and not pay for it just because they're a footballer, just because they're 18.
I guess in a sense we have to acknowledge or accommodate the fact that there is no conviction here. That the facts as we think we know them are based entirely upon this harrowing audio and the photographs of the bleeding.
Sometimes morals come above everything else.
Yeah,
we all know it was him. He knows it was him. Man, you know it was him.
But it's certainly very much strongly alleged it was him. But
he wouldn't have been sitting on 75 grand a week at home if they were unsure, would he?
I don't know.
If they were completely unsure, he's denied it. Would he be sitting at home for 18 months?
I haven't seen any attempted denial, but obviously... But in the absence... I know, but just for broadcasting regulations and the law of the land, albeit that I agree with you, morals must transcend on occasion. Without a conviction, this is all alleged behaviour, but no, I've seen neither. Okay. I've seen neither remorse nor denial, and therefore we're all working on the presumption that it happened. Why should his entire life be punishment, if you like?
His entire life isn't punished. It's not being punished. His entire life is not punished. Playing at the top level may have been punished, and that's unfortunately for him. That's the way he chose to play his cards. So I'm raising sons as well as a daughter, and it's a given how the effect it has on women. And we're already looking at the low conviction rate for rape.
Yep.
Actually, someone can be convicted if I walk past and get themselves into trouble if I walk past them and they wolf whistle. And that can be a complete stranger.
Yeah.
They could say certain things to me and they could get themselves into trouble. So what he's done is far worse. So it's a given what I'm trying to teach my daughter about things. But what about my sons?
Yes.
I've got a 15-year-old Man U crazy footballer. How do I explain to him and raise him knowing that he can get away with that because of his status, because of the cost, because of his age? No. Because at the end of the day, I'm already fighting against low rape conviction charges. I'm already fighting against the sexually explicit madness that he has to try and navigate on social media and online and try and say, this isn't realistic. That's not how you treat women. That's not what women want. That's not how you treat people. So for Man U to then say, we're letting him back on the pitch because he didn't get convicted. But then at the same time, you had Joey Barton. Didn't he get convicted?
I can't remember. You're frightening the lawyer. You're frightening the lawyers, Lisa. Stop mentioning people and things that I haven't got in front of me. But don't do example. I don't think he did anything. Flipping it. What you've done is move it back into the realms of no-brainer, haven't you?
Yeah, it is a no-brainer, but the fact that they're even
but we live in a world, and I'm turning it into a brainer by having a bloody phone in about it because I get people like Sean coming on defending him. But Sean exists.
The fact that Sean's got daughters is incredible.
I thought so.
It's shocking.
I thought so, but for him, it's not a no-brainer. You know, it's.
But then, if an 18-year-old walked around with a knife,
are you making lunch while you're talking to me on live national radio? You are, aren't you? What are you having?
I'm limited for time.
Of course you are.
Tuna mayo baguette.
Delicious. Final question, and I hope it isn't crass to put numbers on it, but how much of this is about football and how much of it is about society in general?
I think it's football.
You what?
Far less about football,
and far more about society in general, which is why the reference to rape convictions and things like that. Barton was a fray. It was common assault and a fray, to be absolutely clear, and he served 74 days of his prison term in July 2008. So I think unfair to bring him into this conversation. Although one of them has a conviction and one of them doesn't. They're very, very different accusations or allegations. It's coming up to 1:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I told you, I can't quite pin it down. The no-brainer, the absolute, this cannot be viewed in any other way. But then it is. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you navigate that. Lisa was doing 3 things at once. She was navigating that, talking to me, and making a tuna baguette. I can only do a maximum of 2. I don't know how do you reach the person who thinks, A, that this is defensible, or B, I can't understand how anyone could be defending it. I think we might have done a better job on the second one than we have on the first one. It's 12:45. It is 12:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I really don't think, says this texter, the fans would expect him back on the pitch. I'm a massive United fan, and I really don't want to see him on the pitch ever again. The news that he is returning, I think, or they're considering returning him to training is I don't think it is going to be decided by the fans. It's going to be decided by the market, as Jonathan Liu writes quite powerfully, incredibly brilliant piece of journalism in The Guardian today. This is the defence of Mason Greenwood is actually, to bring another one of my hobby horses into it, that is what rampant free market ideology looks like. Let the market decide. And of course, if you're letting the market decide, then morals go out the window. They don't matter. Andy's in Milton Keynes. Andy, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
I've
mate.
got my head in my hands with this one. So I'm a teacher of 15 years, and my prediction would be that Mason Greenwood will play for Manchester United again, and that is going to add to the problems that we have with young people who see people like Andrew Tate as a role model, or certainly idolise some of the things that he says.
Yes. And
if Mason Greenwood is allowed to get away with this and resume his career, which I feel he probably will,
Yes.
despite the audio, or not the audio that you read out earlier, this is just going to add... to the problems that we have with our young people. I mean, we made such progress with them, in terms of sexual harassment and all this sort of awareness that banter is a banter, etc., etc. And this is going to set us back again, and it is becoming a huge problem, not just in this area, but with the language towards immigration and all that. And I'm not talking about immigration, but the language, all of that wrapped up, is becoming a far more of an issue in schools.
Is it really? Just this idea that I use the word emboldened usually. People feel emboldened, but with children it's different, because children haven't spent 10 years biting their tongue when they really wanted to say something vile about girls or foreigners. They're, if you like, they're box fresh bigotries.
Yeah. But children are empty vessels, and they're influenced by their parents, they're influenced by their role models, they're hugely influenced by social media. I'm so pleased that the school was closed when the vice chairman of the Conservative Party said what he said about immigrants, because no doubt I would be fielding those sort of comments in school from children to others. 100% that would be happening.
Yeah.
And the reason that I feel Mason Greenwood will get away with this is because these types, certainly the last few years, these types of behaviours have been allowed, maybe emboldened is the right word, but it has become sort of okay. I mean,
normalised.
About what Trump has said, normalised. That's a brilliant word. Yeah. If you think of what Trump said before the election about how he has treated women, just it feels like the country's moral compass has gone completely haywire.
If it ever had one, maybe we were just paying lip service to moral compasses and pretending that we cared about these things while privately scoffing or behaving abominably. I don't know. I mean, maybe we're the naive ones, and everybody else is finally, saying out loud what everybody's been secretly thinking. I don't think so, personally. I think that decency eventually can become a selfish pursuit. You want to live in a decent society so that people can't treat you indecently. But what works for you? How do you reach these kids? How do you? Can you?
Well,
I mean, don't depress the hell out of me. Whatever you do.
I feel, James, that young people are a reflection of the society in which they live, and that is why I'm saying these things are getting a lot worse. It has all been about education or re-education, should I say, and realising, what banter is, or that they shouldn't.
But
be
do you succeed in pushing back? Is what I'm asking, really. Do you? I mean, are there things you do that help boys?
Yeah, I would say we had been making a significant amount of progress. This type of thing, will set us back. I remember an incident where I had some young girls in my year group. They were 13, 14, and they were complaining that builders were wolf whistling to them. Yeah. I couldn't even believe that this. And they were just, sir, are we just meant to? And I was like, oh, obviously not. We can't accept that. Yeah. But it didn't even. Do you know what I mean? We had made such progress, and I've just got my head in my hands because people, he will be allowed to play again, and the way that the country is going in the moral compass, as I've said before, and it's not just this Mason Greenwood, it's the way our politicians behave, it's the language that is used. All of this is reflected in our young people from their parents.
It's pretty crazy when the vice chairman of the Conservative Party can do things in public that would get one of your pupils thrown out of the classroom.
Honestly, James, those exact words would have been repeated to some of our children that we've taken in from a variety of different countries. Those words will have been repeated, and this is what, it's so difficult. And I don't really know what to say, James, because I've just got my head in my hands.
No, don't worry. Well, you've done pretty well. Not only have you been very clear, considering that your head's been in your hands throughout this conversation, but you've said plenty. You've given serious food for thought. And there you go, 30p Leenock, putting words in the mouths of 15-year-olds who will be in classrooms with refugee children, and whether he is bright enough to understand that he's doing that, I genuinely don't know. It sometimes sounds like a bit of a dig at him when I suggest he's too thick to understand what he's doing, but I think it's true. I genuinely think he is, but I hopefully someone will tell him that's what you're doing, mate. You're giving 15-year-olds in Milton Keynes and elsewhere weapons with which to attack 15-year-olds in their own classroom. 12:54 is the time. Thank you, Andy. You're doing great work, but I can see how you must feel like Sisyphus at times. Was it Sisyphus who pushes the ball up the hill and then it rolls back down? I think it was. Jamie's in Wandsworth. Jamie, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi there, James. I think that the feeling of injustice relates more to a system failure. So we see the video and hear the audio, and I think that viscerally connects with us, and we immediately believe it wholeheartedly. But the way that the system works is that someone makes a claim, and then that's tested by the criminal justice system. And in this case, for whatever reason, the poor woman wasn't actually able to go through with that process. So whether that was because she didn't feel strong enough, supported enough, whether it was the sort of hideously low conviction rates, whatever it was, that process of testing whatever defence Mason Greenwood came up with.
I think if the allegation were confined to paper, then I think it would be impossible to argue with you. But people are responding to the recording, aren't they? People are responding to the evidence that has been put before a court, if you like, a metaphorical court in which they sit. And so really, Mason Greenwood's defence would be directed at that evidence, and it hasn't been anywhere.
But as I understand it, he's denied it continuously. He's never admitted to these.
No, they're two different things.
So in that case, your response has to be emotional, because
I don't think it is.
He might have said it was a setup or role play.
Yeah, but he never has, you see.
Well, he's not said anything, as I understand it.
Well, a minute ago you were saying he denied it repeatedly.
Sorry, he's not said anything.
That's all right. So that's why. So there it is. So here's the recording of you saying these things and the pictures of your girlfriend like this. What are you going to say?
I mean, so this is my point. So emotionally,
this is my question. This is you now. It's you I've got on tape, and it's your girlfriend. What are you going to say? It's in the public. It's in the public arena. Everyone's seen it. What are you going to say?
I mean, they have teams of people that advise them what to say. And he probably got.
I'm not asking that. I'm asking you. Here's the pictures of your girlfriend, and here's the recording of you doing those things. Apparently, and now you deserve a defence. So let's hear it.
So if that were me, then it wouldn't have happened in the first place.
That's not the point, is it? We know that it did happen. So you can't say that. We've got the tape and we've got the pictures. So how are you going to defend it?
I think that's
in what
exactly the point.
In what circumstances would you not defend yourself?
In the circumstances that he's advised. So, James, I think so. You know, when you say
I'm going to ask that question again because we're going to run out of time. If that was you, pictures of your girlfriend, recording of you, in what circumstances would you not defend yourself?
When I was told that might compromise my later ability to win at trial, however justified my defence.
You're not a footballer. You're Jamie and Wandsworth. In what circumstances would you not defend yourself?
But I would defend myself in the sense I plead not.
But in what circumstances wouldn't you defend yourself? It's not going to court. It's there. The tape is there. You've got to address it. You've got to talk about it. I can think of one circumstance in which you wouldn't talk about it, and so can you. You just won't say it out loud.
I mean, so you want me to say because he's guilty?
No, I want you to answer the question honestly about you, not him. There's a tape of you doing that to your girlfriend. There's pictures of her covered in bruises. In what circumstances would you leave that in the public domain utterly unchallenged?
None, because even if I did it...
But it has been utterly unchallenged. So in what circumstances could that happen in your mind if it was you?
When you describe his sort of actions, you have to say alleged because it's not proven. And as long as
that's why I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about you. There it is, the pictures of your girlfriend, the recording of you saying those things, and you are leaving it completely unchallenged in the public space. How could that possibly happen? How could you possibly do that?
I simply don't know.
I do. It's coming up to 12:59. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thank you, Jamie. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also rewind live radio. You will find all of LBC's shows on there to catch up on, as well as the best video clips from LBC and other global stations. So rewind live radio on Global Player. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Sawbrick with you at 4. Sheila Fogarty with you now. Or 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 Sheila Fogarty with you now.